Right, here I am back in the shed. Managed to hobble up the garden path with my crutch. I swear to God. Okay, so here's the new mudguard, the RM mudguard here, and here's the old one, and the pattern, the whole pattern is exactly the same, so that's good news. So how I've marked this up is I've marked a piece of, you can just see it there, I think. I've put a piece of tape across, and that comes to the sides, and then I've clamped the mudguard down flat where the holes are. It's got a convenient point in the middle here actually, and I think that's a bearing. I'm not sure what you call it. It's for pushing bearings in. Anyway, it's aluminium, just as a spacer, and then I've got a welding clamp, and that keeps it flat on the bench. And then what I did is I got my 90 degrees square and just lined it up, and so the holes, or rather not the holes, so the lines are at the midpoint of the holes. Now you can see that one there's a few lines, and that was because I was trying to mark it coming down the way from the top, and I was all over the place. So the easiest way is bolt it to a bench and then use your square to line it off, and that's pretty close. I need to just adjust it slightly, and I've done the same on the back side. So what I'll then do is I'll measure 20mm back, and you can see there 20mm back gets me right into the edge of that curve, so it's going to be a real pain to cut that, and 15mm forward, so that one will be a bit easier, and I think it's 50mm down, and so 50mm down will take me to about there. So let me mark that up, and now I've got my straight lines on the mudguard. It's easy enough then to do two other lines, and let me mark it up and show you what that looks like. Right, there's the shape marked out, 50mm deep. There's my measuring stick. The 50mm deep, 20 at the back, 15 at the front, and a very slight curvature on the corners just to stop that sharp edge. But you can see that the problem you've got, interesting, the mudguard seems to rise a bit at the front. It's quite thick here, and it's quite thin there, so this will be the weak point. There's not much weight in this, and the wind tends to push it that way, so that might be okay. As I said, if it's not, I'll have to put a little stiffener in there to stop it bending, but I'm going to try it without it and see what happens. And then the other side's exactly the same. Now I've drawn the black line just inside the pencil mark, so I want to cut along the black line, and then that'll leave the pencil line on the outside, so it'll be the exact shape. Now the other issue I've just uncovered is mudguards are not all the same curvature. So here's the JNS mudguard for the OEM mudguard, and surprise surprise, when I put it on there it doesn't bloody fit. So I think there might be some am I going to bend it? Yeah, I'm going to have to, unless I can find a Suzuki RMZ mudguard stiffener. I'm going to have to bend the JNS one, because you can see there it just doesn't fit. So this is going to have to be bent. It looks like it's going to have to be bent down, and then the curvature knocked out of it. So that's another little pain in the butt. Yeah, so I'm just going to have to bend that slightly to get it to fit better. The issue is, you can see there it's got a slight step up in the OEM, and it hasn't got that step up. It's basically flat in the RM, in the RM Suzuki. So I'm going to have to work out, I don't want to make one, so I'm going to have to work out, I'll probably just bend that. Okay, so that's it. So the question is now, how am I going to cut it? So the plastic's too thick to cut by knife. So it's going to have to be a hand cut, or I'll see if I've got something from my Dremel. So let me have a hunt about to see what I can cut this with, and I'll come back to you to show how it's been cut. So here's another problem I've uncovered. So I've lined this up with the front holes on each mudguard. You can see how the DR650 mudguard gets a big floppy sail on the front and has a much bigger curvature than the RMZ250. But look at the back. This is where the issue's coming in. So on the back, the DR650 mudguard stops quite short, whereas the RM goes quite deep. So the issue you have immediately is this starts to interfere with your exhaust. Now you say, we'll just cut it off. Well, here's the second issue with this. The slots in the RM mudguard would be cut if I cut at the same height, and so that would enable, so the edge of the mudguard would just flap about. So probably the only thing you can do is cut it off that much. And I did read on the website that you can make it tilt slightly forward by putting spacers under it. But of course the issue with that is then it doesn't sit properly on the holes. And as you know, it's got these flat mounting washers that sit underneath. So this is an interesting issue now. What do I do about this extra bit of mudguard? Anyway, that's something I'll ponder as I go cutting away, and I'll let you know how I get on. So let's cut the edges out where I've marked them, and then we'll see what I'm going to do with this back bit. It might be that I have to fabricate something to hold it all together if I want to cut at the same height, or I just get away with cutting a little bit off. I'll see how much it interferes with the exhaust, and we'll take it from there. Right, you can see there how the extended mudguard interferes with your exhaust. So I just need to cut a little bit off that so it can clear it. And then it'll be good. Hopefully it'll pass the other side as well. It's got an oil cooler on that side, so I'll just have to check it doesn't interfere with that. I did think about another plan, is you could actually cut the whole back of this off and then cut the back off the original one and just bolt them both at the top. Use the same holes, for example. Anyway, I'm going to try this. I'm going to cut this off. This has to come down a little bit because it'll have a mudguard brace on it, so it'll come down a little bit, but not much. And we'll see what that looks like. Might be a bit of fiddling about to do yet, and so we'll just see how I go. So I think I found the best way to cut this after a few experiments. A coping saw with a very fine blade, about 20 teeth per inch, I think it's called, and just very gently. Plastic's pretty thick actually, it must be about 5 mil thick. So it's just very gently cutting round the plastic on the black line to get the cutout that I need. Now I won't bore you by cutting all the way around, all the way around this. You can stay and watch if you like, but I think it'll be pretty boring. I'll cut the two sides off, cut the little tail off at the back, mark it up there, and then we'll see where we are. As I said, you don't have to watch all this, it's pretty boring. Alright, so there's the notch cut out. 2 notches, quite thick that plastic. And there's the tail end cut off. You can see there how it leaves, the saw leaves quite a bit of, I don't know what it's called, fur around the edge of the plastic when you cut it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get a couple of files. So I'll get a round file for the corners, and then I'll get a flat file for the edges, and I'll just tidy it all up, and we'll see what that looks like. Right, I think that's me finished with this. It's actually a little bit hard to cut vertical lines in a mudguard that has no flat surface in it at all. So what I did was I made up a template. These are 45mm thick, and so once I cut that line out, the horizontal line, I then put them up, which enabled me to cut the vertical lines. So that's a little trick if you want. So just mount it on some wood, and you can get the lines a bit better. Otherwise it's very difficult to get vertical lines. I even tried to put it on its top and draw lines on it, but just there's too many curved surfaces. Okay, so my next job now is, now I've got this cut, and I have checked it actually fits with them on the bike. I'm not going to bend the original JNS mudguard stiffener that I had on the original one. I'm actually going to make another one up. Now this is too short, this piece, but what I'll do is I'll make it just slightly long at the back, and so I'll give it some stiffening here like that, and then it'll come straight off here to the front, and I'll bend it down to the front there. So I just need some longer pieces of them. But I've cut the mudguard off now, the back's cut, sides are cut, and I'll just make a little stiffener to curve around the top there, because there's obviously two weak points. You can see there as I'm pressing it, there's a weak point here and a weak point there. So I'll just stiffen it up to take that weak point out, and that should be me finished. Okay, so here's the front mudguard stiffener, because I've got two weak points. I've got a weak point here and a weak point here. So I want to stiffen the mudguard up. And also it's a good idea to have mudguard stiffener as well, because the front flaps about a bit. So I designed it on a piece of paper, and then as I was transferring it to a strip, I fine-tuned it a little bit. I was going to go with a fat nose, but I've decided to go with a bit of a thinner nose. The JNS one is a bit wider. I think that's about 100mm wide, that one, and you can only get, or I can only get 80mm wide aluminium. And so what I've had to do is I've got the 80mm coming all the way through, and then tapering down at the end to a thinner nose. As I said, I was going to go a thicker nose, but when you look at the JNS one, the thinner nose works a bit better. It's not as thin as the JNS one. I'm going to go a little bit thicker, but that should work quite nicely. I toyed with the idea also, do I cut a central slot out or do I leave it? And I think it's probably a good idea to cut a slot out, because you've got a slot in your mudguard, so if that gets dirt in it, you can't wash it out. So I am going to cut a slot there, and there's a hole at the top underneath your triple clamp. I'll also make a hole there as well, and that's just, I think, just to let dirt and water get out the way at that point. And at the back I'll have a little fancy scallop bit, and probably don't need that, but I'll do it anyway. And I think that's it. So I've got two fold points, and then it'll curve down, and it'll curve down. That one's a little smaller curve, and this one's obviously a bigger one. So my next job is to try and cut all this out. I'll probably drill the holes first, I think, and then I'll cut it all out and take it from there. So I'll cut the end off, drill the holes, and then trim the other bits off. Right, there it's all cut out, ready to bend. I reckon that's not bad. Holes are slightly off, 1/2 mil or something. That annoys the shit out of me. That looks pretty good for my first ever fork brace. So what I need to do now is bend this down the back here, so I can bolt it on. So I can bolt it on there, and then do exactly the same for the front. It doesn't actually need much of a bend, to be honest. So here it's straight off the vise and onto the bike. Here's the back bit here. So the plate on the top is flat, and then I came down. I could have done a double bend, I suppose. I could have come down, then down, but I reckon I can live with that. The front's pretty good. Front curve seems to fit pretty well on the mudguard. Looking down on top, it's looking pretty good. I think that's the centre. I've marked the holes. As usual, mudguards never sit in the middle for some reason. Don't know why they do that. And the other little thing I'm going to have to think about is this side here. I'm going to have to mount this somehow. I reckon in there's the go. About there's probably the right place. Just have to make, I think it's further. I did draw a black line where the other one was, but that does seem to push it forward a little bit. Maybe that's what it's supposed to do. So I'll have to play about with that a little bit and see how I'm going to mount that. As I said, it was mounted about there on the previous mudguard, so it definitely holds it forward. So I'll just have to bugger about with that a little bit. And but that's it. I think from my first fit, that's pretty good. So what I'll do is I'll take that off, drill the holes. That needs to be bent over a tiny little bit just to finish it off, and then I'll give it a spray paint black, and we're done with this mudguard. Remember, I cut a little bit off the bottom of the mudguard. I think that was probably a good move. I took about that much off, so I've been pretty close to the exhaust. So I think I can live with that. I think that's pretty good, that length. And that's it. It looks like I've finished the mudguard brace. As I said, just a tiny little bit of the front there, and a black bit of black paint, and then we're done, and we'll get it all bolted up. Here's the finished article. It's got the cut in the mudguard, which does make it a bit floppy because you've got two little weak points, and the new brace. Don't look too closely at the paint. If there's any spray painters watching, you might be dying at the moment. So there's the finished article. Sticks up a little bit there, but it's hidden beneath the triple clamp anyway. So I should have, as I said, I should have done a double bend. I should have gone down and then out, but that's good enough. And so I think that's pretty good. I'll get it fitted to the bike now. So 4 bolts. I'll get all the bolts fitted in here. I've got little 4mm mushroom heads, and we'll get it fitted. But I think that's a pretty damn good mudguard brace. Okay, let's get it fitted to the bike. Right, so here's the final design of the mudguard brace. So it was an 80mm aluminium strip times 3mm. It's 460 long end to end. I did some scalloping up the back of it, or the rear as I've called it here. But really that was just to make it a little bit fancy. I didn't really need to do that, but I did it anyway to take the sharp edges off. At the front I went with a 15mm radius, and then there's 2 slots in it. There's about a 20mm slot, square slot in the middle there, and a 20mm tapering long slot at the front. The small holes are 4mm diameter drilled in here, and then I drilled 4.5mm diameter in the mudguard just to give me a little bit of adjustment. And these are 7mm, so these are for 6mm bolts. and so I've drilled them 7mm just in case I was out a little bit. I did notice in the mudguard that these were actually spaced 59mm apart rather than 60, and so I've actually had to slot the mudguard back a little bit to make it fit better on the triple clamp. And that's it. It's very simple. As I said, 80 by 460, and then you can fit it all up here. These lines, small red lines, are where I folded, and so I folded them about 25mm off the holes, the center line of the holes, and that clears. There's actually a ridge in the mudguard about 20mm either side. So the mudguard has a flat part, and then it drops off a ridge down to the mudguard. So I just created 2 folds, and that's it. So if you want to use this, it's not to scale, by the way, if you think you're going to print it out. So if you want to use it for an RMZ mudguard, you want to make a brace, that's the approximate dimensions I used. Well, it's actually the dimensions I use, but and you can copy it onto your piece of aluminium. I hope that helps you. Next I'll show you how I fitted it to the bike. So here's the finished product. It's turned out actually quite good. The got an RM mudguard on it, RMZ250 I think. They're not that well made, to be honest. The distance that side there is slightly greater than that side there, so the mouldings are a bit dodgy, and they sit a little bit off centre, but I can live with that. Here's the brace I made. I think that worked out pretty well. And one of the issues I found is the old cable stay that I had previously. It's difficult to mount it because there's a funny edge on here. So what I did was I mounted a 6mm eye bolt drilled into the mudguard at a flat piece. It's a bit, I didn't want to put it too near the edge, so I drilled it in a little bit higher up, as you can see there, and I reckon that sits quite nicely to hold the speedometer cable in there. It fits actually perfect, to be honest. I was a bit surprised, and that fits through the 6mm eye bolt. So if you take it out at the end, you can fit it through that 6mm eye bolt. So I reckon that holds that pretty well. I'm very pleased with that. I reckon that's a great solution, actually. And the stay goes down the back, and at the front doesn't allow these weak points to flex. And so that's it. New mudguard fitted, and I'm pretty damn pleased with that. So there you are. That's how you fit. And you can see there, you can see the cutouts, and they go over the fork brace. So if you want a fork brace, you have to go cutouts, and you have to go cutouts. You probably want to strengthen your mudguard, otherwise it's going to be too flexible. But I'm pretty pleased with that. It's a lot narrower than the big sail that you get from the Suzuki, and so that's me finished. So our job finished. I am not doing any more jobs. Well, I might change the tyres, but I'm not doing any more jobs. I still can't ride. I'm not allowed to drive yet because of my broken hip, and so the Suzuki will have to sit for a few more weeks by itself until I can get out on it. But I'm pretty damn pleased with that. I think that worked out better than expected, and so you've got everything you need now to build a mudguard and brace if you're going to fit a fork brace to the front. So the Suzuki's all ready for its next adventure. Thanks very much for watching.